The golden cage, the morning sun, filtered through the floor-toozling windows of the Hawthorne penthouse, casting golden shadows across the marble kitchen island, where Sophia carefully arranged fresh orchids in a crystal vase. She hummed softly, the same melody she'd been singing since their wedding day 3 years ago. When Marcus would kiss her forehead and tell her it was their song, those moments felt like distant memories now. "You're up early," Marcus said, appearing in the doorway with his phone already pressed to his ear. Even at 7 in the morning, he was impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, his dark hair perfectly styled. To the outside world, Marcus Hawthorne was the epitome of success, the youngest executive to lead Meridian Pharmaceuticals. A man whose smile graced magazine covers and whose opinions shaped industry trends. Sophia turned, offering him the warm smile that had once made him stop mid-sentence during board meetings. "I wanted to make your favorite breakfast before your flight to Seattle." He barely glanced at the perfectly prepared meal waiting on the counter: fresh berries, artisanal pastries, and the Ethiopian coffee he'd specifically requested from that little shop in Soho. Instead, Marcus continued his phone conversation, discussing quarterly projections and merger possibilities with someone named Victoria. "Marcus." Sophia touched his arm gently as he ended the call. "We haven't really talked in weeks. I was hoping we could spend a few minutes together before you leave." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, a tell Sophia had learned to recognize over the months of his increasing distance. "I'm sorry, but the car's already downstairs. This Seattle deal could be worth $50 million to the company." "I understand. Work is important, but do you?" The sharpness in his voice made her step back, because it feels like you don't. Every conversation becomes about spending time together, or taking vacations we can't afford to take right now. Sophia's chest tightened. When had wanting to connect with her husband become such an inconvenience? When she'd been a pediatric nurse, before Marcus convinced her that his career required a wife who could be available for company functions and social obligations. She'd understood pressure. She'd held crying children through procedures, comforted parents during the worst moments of their lives, worked 16-hour shifts during flu season. But this felt different, like she was slowly disappearing from her own marriage. "I'm not asking for a vacation, Marcus. I'm asking for breakfast with my husband." He sighed, the sound heavy with irritation rather than regret. "Sophia, I need you to understand that everything I'm doing is for us, for our future. These sacrifices now mean we'll have everything we've ever wanted later." The word sacrifices stung. Was she a sacrifice now? Their quiet mornings together, the long conversations about dreams and fears, the way he used to trace patterns on her back while she fell asleep, were all of those sacrifices too. Marcus grabbed his coffee cup and briefcase, pausing only to kiss her cheek with the same perfunctory affection one might show a distant relative. "I'll call you from Seattle." Sophia knew he wouldn't. Just like he hadn't called from Chicago or Miami or any of the other cities that seemed to require his immediate and total attention. She stood in their beautiful kitchen, surrounded by luxury that felt increasingly hollow, and wondered when she'd become a stranger in her own life. As the elevator doors closed behind him, Sophia caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. She looked tired, older somehow, wearing the smile of someone trying desperately to hold on to something that was already slipping away. The disappearing act 3 weeks after Marcus returned from Seattle, Sophia noticed the changes weren't just in his schedule, they were in his eyes. Where warmth once lived, she found calculation. Where love had bloomed, only polite indifference remained. He moved through their shared spaces like a guest, counting down the hours. Until checkout, the morning everything shattered began like any other. Sophia was reviewing patient advocacy proposals at the kitchen table, volunteer work that gave her purpose, while Marcus built his empire, when he appeared with a manila folder tucked under his arm. "We need to talk," he said, his voice carrying the same tone he used during corporate negotiations. Sophia set down her papers, her heart already racing, of course. The word was sharp. Final. This won't take long. He placed the folder on the table between them like evidence in a trial. Sophia stared at it, afraid to breathe, afraid to hope this was about anything other than what her intuition was screaming. "I've discovered something troubling," Marcus began, his practiced executive persona fully engaged. Our marriage license was never properly filed.
Al, there was a clerical error at City Hall. Legally speaking, we were never married.
The words hit Sophia like cold water. What are you talking about? We had a ceremony, we signed papers, the paperwork was defective. I've had our attorneys review everything. His tone remained maddeningly calm, as if discussing quarterly reports rather than dismantling their life together. I'm sorry, Sophia. I know this is shocking, but we need to face reality. Sophia's hands trembled as she reached for the folder. Inside were official-looking documents filled with legal terminology she couldn't quite process through her panic. This doesn't make sense. We got our license together. I remember everything, the questions they asked, the fees we paid, the woman behind the counter who congratulated us. Memory can be unreliable when dealing with bureaucratic processes. Marcus replied, his wedding ring already absent from his finger. What matters is the current legal status. Then we'll get married again, Sophia said quickly, desperately. If there was an error, we'll fix it. You can go to City Hall today. For just a moment, Marcus's mask slipped, and Sophia saw something that looked almost like guilt. But it vanished so quickly she wondered if she'd imagined it. I don't think that's the right solution, he said carefully. This situation has made me realize we've been living in a fantasy. We want different things, Sophia. You want quiet dinners and weekend getaways. I need someone who understands the demands of building an empire. The clinical way he dissected their relationship, reducing years of love to incompatible lifestyle preferences, made Sophia feel like she was drowning. Marcus, please, we can work through this. Marriage isn't supposed to be easy all the time. We weren't married, he repeated, standing and smoothing his tie. I'll have my assistant coordinate the logistics of separating our belongings. Okay, you can stay in the penthouse through the end of the month while you make arrangements. Sophia watched him walk toward the door, this man she'd loved completely, who was now speaking to her like a business associate being terminated. Where are you going? I have meetings all week. Then I'm flying to Napa for an extended business retreat. I think some space would be good for both of us. After he left, Sophia sat alone with the folder, tears blurring the legal text that supposedly erased their life together. She tried calling him that evening, then the next day, but her calls went straight to voicemail. His assistant, Janet, claimed he was in back-to-back meetings and would return her call soon. He never did. By the third day, Sophia realized she'd been blocked entirely. Her texts showed as delivered, but never read. Emails bounced back as undeliverable. It was as if Marcus Hawthorne had simply decided she no longer existed, sitting in their bedroom, her bedroom now, apparently. Sophia felt the first flutter of life inside her. She pressed her hand to her still flat stomach, tears streaming down her face as she realized she was carrying the child of a man who had just erased her from his life with the efficiency of a corporate restructuring. But as the initial shock began to fade, something else emerged. Determination. Sophia had spent her career fighting for vulnerable patients against indifferent systems. She knew how to investigate, how to ask the right questions, how to find the truth when powerful people preferred convenient lies. And she was going to find out exactly what had happened to their marriage license. The grand deception. 2 months after vanishing from Sophia's life, Marcus Hawthorne stood in the vineyard's bridal suite, adjusting his platinum cufflinks while gazing out at the rolling hills of Napa Valley. The Sterling family estate was breathtaking, 300 acres of prime wine country, with a stone mansion that had graced the covers of architectural magazines. Everything was perfect, just as Victoria had promised. You clean up well, future husband, Victoria Sterling said, appearing behind him in a shimmering ivory gown that had cost more than most people's cars. Her blonde hair was swept into an elegant chignon diamond earrings, catching the late afternoon light. She was everything Marcus had convinced himself he wanted: ambitious, connected, and completely aligned with his vision of success. Future wife, he replied, kissing her cheek carefully to avoid smudging her makeup. Are you ready to become Mrs. Hawthorne? Victoria's smile was radiant, but Marcus caught something calculating in her green eyes. I've been ready since the day you told me you were finally free from that nurse. The casual dismissal of Sophia made something twist uncomfortably in Marcus's chest, but he pushed the feeling aside. This was business as much as romance. Victoria's father controlled Sterling Industries, and their marriage would open doors that had been previously locked. Her family's pharmaceutical patents alone were worth hundreds of millions. The ceremony itself was flawless. 200 of the most influential people in business and politics watched as Marcus and Victoria exchanged vows beneath an arch of white roses and eucalyptus. The officiant, a judge from Victoria's father's golf club, pronounced them husband and wife as photographers captured every moment for the society pages. During the cocktail hour, Marcus worked the crowd like the seasoned executive he was. Senator Richardson discussed upcoming healthcare legislation over aged scotch. The CEO of Global Medical Supply hinted at potential partnerships while sampling the estate's reserve wine. Victoria moved seamlessly through the guests, her laughter bright and her conversation sharp, proving she could match Marcus's ambition step for step. "Ladies and gentlemen," the wedding planner announced as the sun began to set behind the vineyards. "Please join us in the grand ballroom for dinner and dancing." The ballroom was a masterpiece of understated elegance. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables adorned with white orchids and gold accents. The wedding cake, a four-tiered creation from San Francisco's most exclusive bakery, stood as the centerpiece beneath a canopy of fairy lights. As the evening progressed, Marcus found himself swept up in the perfection of it all. The speeches were eloquent, the wine exceptional, the networking opportunities endless. Dr. Patricia Kelman from the FDA complimented his recent initiatives. Arson Morrison from Biotech Weekly promised favorable coverage of the merger talks that had brought Marcus to Seattle months earlier. "Time for the groom's toast," Victoria whispered. Squeezing his hand as dessert was served, Marcus stood, his confidence buoyed by champagne and the admiring faces around him. He was Marcus Hawthorne, pharmaceutical visionary, master of his own destiny. The past was behind him, buried beneath legal documents and blocked phone numbers. "Friends, family, colleagues," he began, his voice carrying easily across the ballroom. "Tonight isn't just about Victoria and Mitts, about new beginnings. About having the courage to pursue what truly matters, even when it means leaving comfort behind." The crowd murmured appreciatively. Victoria beamed up at him, her hand resting on his arm. "I spent too many years settling for less than I deserved," Marcus continued, the words flowing easily now. "Tonight I stand before you not just as a husband, but as someone who finally understands what it means to choose love over convenience, ambition over complacency." He raised his champagne flute, the crystal catching the light like liquid starlight. "To Victoria, my partner in every sense of the word, to our future, and to the courage to build something truly extraordinary together." The ballroom erupted in applause and raised glasses. Cheers echoed from every corner as 200 of society's elite toasted Marcus's new beginning. The photographer captured the moment perfectly. Marcus and Victoria locked in an embrace, surrounded by celebration, their faces glowing with happiness. And success would be the photo that ran in tomorrow's business journals, the image that would define this perfect evening. But as the applause began to fade and guests returned to their conversations, the ballroom's ornate double doors slowly opened. A figure appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the hallway's softer lighting. Marcus's champagne flute slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers, shattering against the marble floor in a spray of crystalline wine. Sophia stood in the entrance. 6 months pregnant now, wearing a simple black dress that emphasized her dignity rather than her condition. In her right hand, she held a manila envelope. In her left, small velvet box that Marcus recognized with growing horror. Their eyes met across the crowded ballroom. Sophia smiled, not with anger or vindictiveness, but with the quiet confidence of someone who had finally found the truth. The reckoning, the ballroom fell into an eerie silence as Sophia walked forward, her heels clicking rhythmically against the marble floor. 200 guests turned to stare, champagne glasses frozen halfway to lips, conversations dying mid-sentence. The only sounds were the soft rustle of her dress and the distant string quartet. still playing their elegant waltz as if the world hadn't just shifted on its axis. Marcus stood paralyzed at the head table, his face cycling through shock, recognition, and something that looked dangerously close to panic. Victoria's manicured fingers tightened on his arm, her smile faltering as she took in the pregnant woman approaching with such unsettling calm. "Marcus," Victoria whispered urgently. "Who is that?" But Marcus couldn't speak. He watched Sophia navigate between the tables with the same grace she'd once brought to hospital corridors, acknowledging startled guests with polite nods as if she were simply attending a dinner party rather than crashing a wedding reception. Dr. Kelman from the FDA leaned toward her companion. "Isn't that Sophia Chen? She used to work at Children's Memorial before she married?" The woman's voice trailed off as understanding dawned. Senator Richardson pulled out his phone, recognizing a story in the making. The photographers, initially confused, began raising their cameras as instinct took over. Sophia reached the head table and stopped directly in front of Marcus, her dark eyes meeting his with a steadiness that made him feel exposed in ways no boardroom confrontation ever had. Up close, she was luminous with pregnancy, her skin glowing with health despite the exhaustion Marcus could see in the fine lines around her eyes. "Hello, Marcus," she said quietly, her voice carrying easily in the hushed ballroom. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." Victoria stepped forward, her social training kicking in despite her confusion. "I'm sorry, but this is a private celebration. If you have business with my husband, your husband..." Sophia's eyebrows rose slightly, and for the first time Marcus saw a flash of something sharp in her expression. "That's interesting, Victoria. I don't believe we've been properly introduced. I'm Sophia Hawthorne." The words hit the assembled crowd like a physical blow. Gasps echoed from every corner of the ballroom. Victoria's face went white beneath her carefully applied makeup. "That's impossible," Victoria said, but her voice wavered. "Marcus told me his previous relationship ended months ago. He said you were never legally married." Sophia smiled, and Marcus recognized the expression from her nursing days, the same calm professionalism she'd displayed when delivering difficult news to patients' families. She placed the manila envelope on the table between the untouched wedding cake and the scattered champagne flutes. "Legally married," Sophia repeated thoughtfully. "Yes, that's exactly what we were, or actually..." She opened the envelope and withdrew a document, unfolding it with deliberate care. "This is our marriage certificate, filed properly with the city of San Francisco on June 15th, 3 years ago. I had it authenticated by 3 separate legal offices after Marcus claimed there had been some mysterious clerical error." The photographers were moving closer now, their cameras capturing every moment. Marcus could see tomorrow's headlines writing themselves: "Tech executive's bigamy scandal, pharmaceutical prince's double life, the wedding crasher who changed everything." "The interesting thing about investigating bureaucratic errors," Sophia continued, her voice never rising above conversational level, "is that they leave paper trails, digital records, dime stomps, when you know the right questions to ask. Thanks to my advocacy work, I've learned to ask very specific questions. The truth becomes quite clear." She looked directly at Marcus, and he saw not the heartbroken woman he'd left behind, but someone who had spent 2 months methodically dismantling his carefully constructed lies. "There was no clerical error, was there, Marcus? No defective paperwork. No legal loophole that magically erased our marriage." Sophia picked up the small velvet box, opening it to reveal Marcus's original wedding band, the simple platinum band he'd claimed to have lost during a business trip to Chicago. "You simply decided that your wife and unborn child were inconvenient obstacles to your new life?" Victoria stumbled backward, her hand flying to her mouth. "Unborn child?" she whispered. Sophia placed her hand on her rounded belly, the gesture unconsciously protective. 7 months along. Daughter, actually. "I found out the same week Marcus disappeared from our lives." The silence in the ballroom was deafening. Marcus could feel the weight of 200 pairs of eyes, could see his carefully built reputation crumbling in real time. Board members, investors, politicians, everyone who mattered in his professional world was witnessing his complete humiliation. "Sophia," he finally managed, his voice hoarse.
Please, let me explain what..."
She interrupted her composure, never wavering. How you blocked my phone calls while planning your wedding to another woman? How you fabricated legal documents to convince me I was never your wife? How you abandoned your pregnant spouse to pursue a more profitable marriage? She set his wedding ring on the table beside the marriage certificate. The small click of metal against marble, somehow thunderous in the silence. I didn't come here for explanations, Marcus. I came to return what belongs to you, and to make sure. Victoria understood exactly what kind of man she was marrying. Sophia looked at Victoria with something that might have been pity. I'm sorry you've had to learn this way. You deserve better than to discover your husband is a bigamist at your own wedding reception. With that, Sophia turned and walked back toward the ballroom doors, leaving behind a tableau of shattered crystal, stunned guests, and to people whose perfect evening had just become the scandal of the decade. Rising from ashes 6 months later, the scandal had consumed everything Marcus thought he'd built. Victoria's marriage was annulled within weeks, her family's business connections severed permanently. Meridian Pharmaceuticals' board forced his resignation after stock prices plummeted. The man who once graced magazine covers now faced congressional hearings about corporate ethics and personal fraud. Sophia, meanwhile, had found her calling. Using the settlement from their very real divorce, she launched Advocate's Voice, a nonprofit helping vulnerable patients navigate medical bureaucracy. Her story of quiet strength resonated nationwide. The pregnant woman who faced down power, with nothing but truth, became a symbol of dignity in crisis. Mama's home, little star, Sophia whispered. Entering the sunny apartment she shared with 8-month-old Elena, the baby gurgled happily from her high chair. Where Dr. James Chen was attempting to feed her pureed carrots with limited success. She's definitely inherited your determination, James laughed, wiping orange from his scrubs. Refuses to eat anything that isn't on her terms. Sophia smiled, watching this gentle pediatric surgeon who'd entered their lives through volunteer work at the clinic. James had never tried to rescue her instead. He'd simply stood beside her as she rebuilt herself, offering quiet support and genuine partnership. Marcus called again, James mentioned carefully, handing Sophia the baby. Third time this week? Sophia kissed Elena's forehead, breathing in that sweet baby scent that made everything else fade away. Did you answer? No, but he left a message. Something about wanting to apologize, to make things right. Through the window. Sophia could see the small garden she'd planted tomatoes and herbs growing strong in recycled containers. It wasn't the penthouse's marble luxury, but it was real, honest hers. Some things can't be made right, James. They can only be left behind. She looked at this man who read bedtime stories to Elena, who brought Sophia coffee during late advocacy meetings, who chose them every single day without fanfare or conditions. But that doesn't mean something beautiful can't grow in their place. 3 years later, Sophia walked down the aisle of a small chapel, Elena scattering flower petals ahead of her mother's simple white dress. James waited at the altar with tears. In his eyes, not because Sophia was beautiful, though she was, but because she had chosen to trust love again. In the front row sat the women whose cases Sophia had championed, the patients who'd found their voices through her advocacy, the community she'd built from authenticity rather than ambition. Where void, why I grew, where I go, why I wiker, why I were, why to remember, why we rye, why where I'm married, cradle, and fire, regire, and sunrise away, I was away, got well, sit well, apartment across town, the newspaper shaking in his hands. The woman he'd discarded had become everything he'd once pretended to, respected, admired, genuinely successful. Sophia's new last name would be Chen. Her nonprofit had expanded to 5 cities. And Elena, now a bright 4-year-old, called James Daddy with the unconscious trust of a child who had never known anything but love. The perfect lie had crumbled. But from its ashes rose something Marcus had never understood, a life built on truth, where love wasn't a transaction, but a choice made new each morning, where strength came not from what you could take, but from what you chose to give. Sophia had learned that the most powerful revenge was no revenge at all, simply living well, loving deeply, and raising a daughter who would never settle for anything less than Shadu Servet.